Ross dialed the secret group's hotline, using his eidetic memory to recall the number at a glance, looking nervous. Peter reassured him not to worry, promising a breakfast date the next day before hanging up. The following day after work, Peter sneaked back to the Lambo Hotel. The moment he stepped inside, something felt off. All the agents had mysteriously vanished, and the hotel was in the dark. Peter raced towards Ross' room. Meanwhile, Helen, disguised as a waitress with a gun, planned room service and barged in after no answer to her knock. After reporting the target absent, the voice urged her to the escape route, a well-planned trap. The building lost power and network, a bad omen. This is all to make Ross disappear off the radar. At that moment, Agent Peter was gallantly assisting Helen in an escape with Ross. Killer Paul, eagle-eyed, shot Ross without a word. Peter fired back, fleeing with Ross. Helen met Paul in the escape tunnel. Paul rushed after her, but Helen strolled down calmly. Peter had already led Ross into the banquet hall. Ross kept asking Peter about the whereabouts of his 6 agents, wondering if the White House had reassigned them. Peter sensed something was amiss too, but now wasn't the time for pondering, as Paul had his silenced pistol and was closing in, making the atmosphere unbearably tense. Helen elegantly entered the courtroom, electrifying the service staff on entry. She wrapped herself in a coat while Peter and Ross hid in a nearby room. Peter found his gun empty and came up with a trick. He broke a window, looked out, and found it was high above the ground. Peter told Ross they had to leap out the window. However, before he could finish, he stumbled heavily to the ground, prompting Ross to worryingly ask what was wrong. Peter had no time to explain and urged Ross to jump quickly. Meanwhile, Paul had spotted them, fronting at the locked door. He raised his gun and aimed at the door, and just as he broke it open, Ross jumped down right after him. Peter and Ross fled down the hallway. Paul missed Helen was at the door chasing them. Ross in pajamas stood out in the crowd, so Peter hurriedly took him to change. Peter noticed Ross had swiped a customer's phone and immediately asked what was going on. Ross replied that he had no phone in the safe house, so the enemy couldn't track him. Now Ross asked Peter to call the White House to see who removed the agents. Xu, in a meeting, answered, and Peter described the situation. Xu immediately ordered everyone to leave, leaving only 2 security officers behind. This meeting turned into an impromptu trial as they analyzed the suspects who knew Ross' whereabouts with a particular suspicion, falling on FBI Deputy Director Jamie. Xu expressed his deep concern for Peter and Ross' safety, urging them to return to the White House, but Peter sensed the danger and declined. While they talked, Helen infiltrated the store, surveying carefully. After checking the situation, she turned to leave while Peter and Ross, unaware of their close call, discussed their next hiding spot. Peter's approach seemed too passive, while Ross was more aggressive, eager to learn what had happened to his aunt and uncle and why someone wanted to hire a hitman for him. Ultimately, Peter caved in to Ross and took him to his aunt and uncle's, finding blood on the carpet. Ross was devastated. Were they killed? Ross didn't want to dwell on it, but knew the truth was for the case. He told Peter his aunt and uncle said there was a traitor in the White House. There were only 7 days left for the nation, and their leader seemed to be a figure codenamed Osprey. Peter eagerly urged Ross to think if anything else was missing. After some contemplation, Ross finally realized, we still haven't found the car from that cabin. The cabin came into view for Peter. As soon as he entered, he recognized it was the right spot. It was clear that someone had been here recently. In other words, the hard drive was likely hidden here. Sure enough, as Peter meticulously searched the cabin, he found a loose brick. He pried it open, revealing a hard drive inside. Peter quickly asked Ross to see what was on it, only to discover it was heavily encrypted. This wasn't just your run-of-the-mill security. Even Ross, the cybersecurity wizard, couldn't crack it. I can't even pry it open, he exclaimed. The number 2781 looked oddly familiar, like a code link to last year's subway explosion. Peter never expected to return here after all the hassle. He quickly took out his phone to ask Hugh for help cracking the drive. Right after dialing, she revealed that Jamie had reassigned the agents via an order from her office, as she had been murdered. After hearing this, Peter quickly summarized his discovery, but Hugh urged him to return to the White House with Ross, or they would both be in serious danger. Ross shook his head immediately, but with Peter hesitating, Hugh issued a death order. The 3rd episode of the Grand Flying Star case was about to unfold. And eomat at letter 3ca is circumflex eomat 3 oomat until the letter 2 bd cyrillic letter 4 abc stilla acute turn direct reflex a quarter mod j 3 oomat ogrov eomat microethic knots and a half oomat dimes divide by a tilde divided by pound period I eomat d acute egrov y acute ogrov cyrillic letter 4 7 1 letter 4 abc stilla divided by o pound net sign oomat divided by cyrillic letter 4 ab plus or minus Chinese letter 3ca had been shot a quarter ogrov letter 3ca was shot poundnets and couldn't believe it after 30 Yukari micro divided by our letter 3ca was shot after 30 years poundnets I know way she suddenly betray a quarter ogrov letter 3ca she wouldn't betray poundnet sign for no reason I circumflex eomat I thorn Armenian I circumflex micro eomat ogrov eomat plus or minus IQ poundnet sign I eomat a quarter R divided by 3 copyright cyrillic letter 4 bb omo pound. At that moment, Ross didn't care. During the call, he thought, if Hugh was the traitor, they were in real danger. If those three were indeed traitors, Peter couldn't imagine the chaos that would ensue. However, Ross held his ground, and Peter reluctantly he told Hugh he'd go to the White House with Ross at 10 next morning, but actually spent the night on a hillside. They wondered if the pursuer, the assassin, would arrive at the cabin. The FBI deputy director's death and hard drive discovery prompted a White House meeting. Silence fell over intelligence agencies. The president ordered quiet, but Hugh stayed. Robert, knowing nothing of Ross' uncle and aunt's situation, was now forced to handle the issue. So he had to ask the president what happened to act properly and protect survivors. The president thought for a moment. They waited all night, yet no one came. Peter told Ross had called Hugh's private number if Hugh were the mole. The killers would have arrived. Just then, cries for help echoed through the forest, leaving Peter dumbfounded. I still wanted to help you with something.